Konnichiwa, Lewis desu. Hey, I'm Lewis and welcome to my channel. So if you clicked on this video because you're interested in Japan and learning Japanese, then we have something in common. So I suppose this video is aimed towards absolute beginners of Japanese language, people who are maybe just starting or have just started learning Japanese, but maybe you don't have a clear direction as to how to proceed. And this time last year I was in that same position. I've been interested in anime for the longest time and the Japanese concepts that you get exposed to through watching anime. As I grew older, I got more and more into anime and also became interested in Japanese historic and modern cultures that you often see portrayed through the medium of anime. And I'm not just talking about the well-known samurai and ninja that you often see in many anime, but I'm also talking about the food and the scenic images and the charming actions performed by the characters, which just seems so different to the culture that I grew up in the UK. And through all of this, I didn't really entertain the idea of learning Japanese myself. I thought that it would just be impossible. It just looks too complicated. There's no way I can do it. I mean, one look at the writing system I think is enough to put a lot of people off learning Japanese. And indeed, there is the question, why would you even want to learn Japanese? It's a language that's only really spoken inside Japan, so it's not really useful elsewhere in the world. And I felt this way too, at least until a few years ago when I started to realise, how much joy and, enjoyment I've got from watching anime over the years. And when I was younger, I watched the dub versions of anime, and I can remember watching Dragon Ball dub on my first ever laptop that I ever got. That was many, many years ago, and watching Pokemon, which at the time I didn't know was an anime. But I used to watch Pokemon on the TV when that aired in dub, and that was the greatest thing, coming home from school and just, getting a few episodes in before dinner. So I became more and more curious about anime and would watch more and more shows online, and where there wasn't a dub available, I would watch the subbed version. And eventually I switched to just solely watching the subbed version, and I didn't know why that was until recently, when I sort of realised that you can't beat listening to the original audio that was meant to be there. It's all the emotions that get portrayed through the characters, how the director wanted this scene to sound. You can't beat that. And I think it was a couple years ago when I realised that I was actually starting to actively listen to the Japanese being spoken in the sub versions, and I started to pick up a few words here and there. And I'd never been interested in learning a language before, but I started to find that I was becoming more and more, I was enjoying it more, being able to hear what my favourite characters were saying and then trying to, repeat that. And similarly, it was around that sort of time when I started researching more and more about Japan, watching travel-based videos, exploring the country, and I sort of started to feel quite a strong bond building inside me between myself and Japan. And about this time last year, I decided to take my interest to the next level and start learning Japanese. And so that's where the point of this video kicks in. So maybe you're like me and you love many different aspects about Japan, and you've decided that you want to start learning Japanese. Well, let me just first say, well done for getting to this point where you've made the decision and you're ready to make the commitment to learn Japanese. That's really incredible. So I want to help you by giving you a direction in which you can start from, which is based on my own experience. And so firstly, how are you going to learn it? I'll tell you my recommendations based on my own experiences as someone who's new to learning languages. Now, I don't think that there's a correct way to start learning Japanese, but from my experience, I feel quite happy with my progress that I've made so far. So I'll give you my recommendations based on that experience. Very simply, I'll give you two recommendations that I found really useful when I started learning. So my first recommendation is that you invest in a textbook. There's lots of online resources out there that are really good, but I don't think anything's quite so motivating and useful as having a textbook physically in front of you. And then we come to the question, well, which textbook should I use? There's quite a few out there. I've only used one series of textbooks prior to starting at university, and I would really recommend it to beginners, especially people who are new to learning languages, and the series is Japanese from Zero. It's these are the ones. So these are the ones that I would recommend. I have books 1 to 4 in the series. I think there's a 5th book, and I think there's also a book that focuses mainly on kanji. I don't have those two, but I got 1 to 4, and prior to starting at university, I think I got halfway through book 4 I managed to get to. So what made these books really great for me is that they were simple and they're easy to understand, and the grammar points are taught in a way that makes sense and is logical. These books also explain things in a way that's quite easy to understand for beginners to languages in general. For example, linguistic words and terminology like volitional and transitive, intransitive, that kind of thing. These books don't use those kinds of words, and if they do, they explain them in a way that's easy to understand for people who haven't studied language or linguistics before. And also, I think that these books teach Japanese in more of a unique way when you compare it to some other textbooks. Especially the one that I'm using now at university. I feel that this one teaches certain things slightly differently. In particular, for this book, I think the verbs are taught slightly differently as well, and I actually think that they're taught in a way that's easier to understand in this book series compared to the one that I'm using now at university. Another point is that this book covers grammar, vocabulary, and workbook exercises all in one, which is really useful and really convenient. The textbook that I'm using at the moment, I'll show you that as well. So it's this, the Daiichi series. So this series has split everything into 3 parts. So you've got the main text, which is solely in Japanese, and there's a workbook, which is separate, and also a translation of the main text with all the grammar points. So this is probably the most important part of the 3 books. But all of these you have to buy separately, and you need all 3 really to be able to work through the series. So that's quite frustrating, and it can get quite expensive, all these 3, when you buy them together. Whereas the Japanese from Zero series has everything included in one book, which is really convenient, and it's also more affordable. And one final point I want to make about this textbook series is that it's something I haven't seen with other textbooks, is that there's an online learning platform and a YouTube channel dedicated to this series. So the author of this book series, Mr. George Trombley, owns or runs a YouTube channel dedicated to the series, where he's put up video lessons that are basically a follow-on from the lessons inside the books, which I found really useful. And that's what I used to do, is read through the lesson in the book and then go to the YouTube channel and watch the video lesson corresponding to the lesson I've just learned. And that was really useful because I could get more clarification on the grammar points that maybe I didn't understand from reading the book. And this is really great if you're like me and you learn quite well from visuals and watching videos, because it makes it more interesting and enjoyable to learn. So I'll link that channel in the description, and yeah, I really recommend this book series. Yeah, so that's the main resource that I would recommend. But I also want to say that I found it very useful to use different resources during my self-study. And so for this I have one recommendation. So in addition to the Japanese from Zero book series, I also used an online resource called JapanesePod101.com. I don't know for sure, but I think it's one of the most popular online resources for learning Japanese. So if you Google it, it'll probably be close to the top at least. You can create a free account on their website and dive straight in. And again, they've got a YouTube channel which you can watch as well. But as for me personally, I bought the premium account. I got it for a pretty good deal at the time, and I don't regret it at all. So they have lots of conversational audio spoken by native Japanese speakers, which is really good for practicing your listening and also your speaking if you repeat after the things that they are saying, which I'd recommend you do. It's what I do. It's probably where I get the most practice for listening and speaking. And it was also especially useful before I went to Japan, before I took my trip there, because they have a survival phrases section where you can listen to all sorts of phrases that you might need to use when you go to Japan. So to give a brief outline, they have quite a big collection of podcasts and videos for you to watch and listen to, along with lots of grammar points that they write down, so you can read through the grammar points as you go through the lesson, which I found was quite useful. And I actually attribute my success in learning hiragana and katakana to the videos that are in Japanese Pod 101, because before watching the videos I just couldn't come up with a way that was good enough for me to remember the characters, and there's quite a few characters. There's lots more than there are characters in the English alphabet, for example. So you kind of need to figure out strategies for remembering the characters, and the videos on there really helped me. So I do recommend it for beginners, especially if you use it alongside, as a tool alongside, learning from a textbook like this, for example. Now there are many more resources that I use now, but I don't want to overwhelm you and overcomplicate your learning process by throwing out loads of different resources for you to look at. So for now I want to just give you those two recommendations for starting to learn Japanese. Now I'm not going to tell you how you should study, what study methods are best. I'm not going to show you how I study Japanese, because to be perfectly honest, there's no right answer as to how to study. And everyone's different, so what I do probably won't work for you. Likewise, there's loads of things that other people do that just don't work for me or just seem way too complicated. I would just say keep things simple. Why overcomplicate an already pretty complicated language by making things more difficult for yourself? Just use a textbook and have a notebook with you in case you want to write down grammar points. I do that a lot. I write things down after I've just read them, because it helps me to absorb it better by writing it down. I think there are some people out there, that have perfectly written notebooks and create these really elaborate study plans and, detailed methods of how they're going to learn things. But honestly, I think, it's just overcomplicating things, and it seems quite stressful that way. And that's something that I think is really important, is don't make learning stressful for yourself. So just take your time with things, take things at your own pace, and learn in a way that is comfortable for you. You can try other people's study methods and see if it works for you, but if it doesn't work, there are other ways you can do things. So just figure out the way that's best for you and follow through with that. So if study plans are something that you would benefit from, then by all means do it. Personally, I don't have a study plan, and I don't think I'd follow one, even if I did have one. So that's why I'm not bothering wasting time in making one. I've been studying for about Well, it's basically a year, and I think it'll be at least another 3 to 4 years until I have a good understanding or, a good grasp of the language. So it's down to yourself to be strict with your time and to keep yourself motivated. You don't have to plan everything, but you could tell yourself, okay, I'm going to dedicate 1 to 2 hours every day to Japanese study, and forget everything else, just focus on Japanese. But with that being said, let's also be real. Unless you're pretty fortunate in life, things don't always go so well. There are days where I find myself completely unmotivated and just feel really down. And at those times, I don't think I'd be able to follow a study plan. To be honest, I probably wouldn't even want to keep studying. And you shouldn't study if you're feeling down, because you're not going to get any benefit from it, and you're probably going to end up feeling worse after you're finished. So just take your time with it, study when you feel like you're in a good mood, when you feel motivated. Don't force yourself to stick to a strict study plan. You might find that you get stressed out and it starts to wear you out, and studying will start to feel like more of a chore than something that's interesting, and that shouldn't be the case. And learning Japanese is a pretty big commitment, you have to pick at it slowly over time. You're not gonna, being realistic, you're not going to master this language quickly. Be prepared to dedicate lots of time towards it, and one thing I would say is don't compare yourself to other people. You'll undoubtedly come across people in future that are better at Japanese than you are. Maybe they can speak better Japanese than you can, and they might say that they've been studying for less time than you. But it's important that you don't compare yourself to them. Don't let their success overshadow your own achievements. We all go through life differently, and people have different life experiences and things that affect them as well. So whether it takes you 5, 10 years, even 20 years to learn the language, be proud of that achievement. So that's something that I just want to emphasize, don't compare yourself to others negatively. Be proud of your own achievements, and later down the line, look back at the things that you've learned, how far you've come, and then feel proud about that. And finally, one last thing is, it's pretty cliche, I suppose, but just don't give up. It will be difficult, and you will come across things that you just can't get your head around. I've come across those things many times already in my first year of learning Japanese, and I'm sure that I will come across them many more times. But yeah, don't give up. Keep doing your best, and piece by piece it'll all come together. Learning Japanese is not a race. Take it slowly. So I hope that came out okay. I'm awkward, and I'm aware that sometimes my sentences don't always make sense, and that a lot of the times I miss points. Sorry if you can hear some rustling behind me, that's my cat. But yeah, as I was saying, hopefully that came out okay. I know sometimes I miss points and I don't make sense, so yeah, sorry about that, but I hope I was at least able to give you a good direction and a good place to start on your journey to learn Japanese. So yeah, that's it from me. Do your best, good luck, and well, thank you for watching.
Bye bye. じゃあね。みんなありがとうございます。
See ya. Harry! Nah. This is the problem with having a white cat.